the Nova Universidade de Lisboa for hosting this event and everyone present at this first table, and all the trainers and trainees who are going to take part in it. So I will not prolong my presentation, only thank you and congratulate you for starting this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus. So now I'll just like to briefly introduce Margarida Esperança Pina. She's the Vice Coordinator of the first cycle licensure in translation of the Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities, and she's also a member of the Comics Translation School organization. So, Margarida.
Thank you so much. Vou falar em português apenas para desejar as boas-vindas. Dizer que é para mim, enquanto docente, um enorme gosto poder mostrar aos meus estudantes de tradução outra faceta do nosso dia-a-dia. Portanto, vou ter a sorte de privar durante umas horas com tradutores, editores, autores. Portanto, penso que seja de facto um momento importante para a formação de futuros tradutores. De resto, não me vou alongar, queria mostrar a minha cara para dizer que estou à disposição para o que for preciso durante estes 2, 3 dias, para quem fica nos workshops, para os workshops de sábado, e queria dar uma última nota, dizer que esta organização foi toda feita em formato Zoom. Estou emocionada porque hoje, para além das minhas colegas da Universidade dos Açores e do Minho, que são minhas colegas da área do francês, pela primeira vez estamos, quase toda a equipa da Task Force está hoje em formato humano, como eu dizia ao Jacob ontem, em formato humano a conviver. Portanto, eu queria agradecer esta oportunidade ao iCon-MICs, que me deu, e desejar que os próximos dias sejam dias de pleno aproveitamento intelectual, mas também social. Obrigada.
Obrigado, Margarida. And now I would like to ask Ana Duarte Rodrigues, who coordinates with Isabel Amaral CEHUM, the Inter-University Center for the History of Science and Technology, to give us a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo. Hello, good morning, everybody. So, on behalf of me and my colleague Isabel, co-coordinator of the Inter-University Center for the History of Science and Technology, usually we call it CEHUM, we would like to compliment Viviane Alari and Jesus Jimenez Varia of the iCON-MICs. And also I would like to compliment my colleagues of the table, Margarida Esperança Pina, Paulinas, and Hugo Almeida. So ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I just have 2 or 3 words to say about translation and history of science. Well, Hugo, when he invited me, well, I would like that the heads of my center would be there. I know this is not the mainstream of CEHUM research topics, but still I would like him to be there. And then in the end, I was thinking about this, and I called him and no, it has all to do with CEHUM. And I'm just going to say why. So this project of which Hugo Almeida is enrolled is important for CEHUM, and as it resonates somehow, science translated by Michel Goyan. Not in the sense of translation of an episode of history of science into comics, but when envisioned through a much larger framework, in the sense of how important translation is for knowledge transmission, whether if it is between 2 languages or from a text into design. It is always a moment of embracement between 2 cultures, at least 2 cultures, sometimes it's much more. The good translation, as we all know, is not the literal one, but the one that expresses the sense, but also the feelings that lie behind the author's words, the one that grasps and is able to transmit the soul of the text. In some historical periods, translations occupied a major importance as guardians of knowledge and in the circulation of ideas and their adaptation to different contexts. I just recall the Baghdad School of Translations active between the 8th and the 13th centuries, in which the most important Greek works were translated into Arabic such as Dioscorides' Materia Medica. The importance of these translation schools were a cornerstone for Renaissance, as it is now already acknowledged that many of the key classical works were saved under the Islamic umbrella. Closer to us, I recall the fundamental role of translations played by humanists during Renaissance, where in the Italican and Iberian peninsulas, translations of Greek and Latin into vernacular languages, translation of several scientific Arabic works into Castilian, and multiple other conjunctions were occurring at a fast pace. So I think we can take this as a starting point and think of doing something about science and translation, as it is one of the major importance for knowledge dissemination and construction. Just one last example, quite often translation involving plants follow an extreme adaptation to the public they try to reach, to such an extent that we can even discuss if they are translations or a new text. Because they are translating something from Greek now into Portuguese, for example, or Latin into Portuguese, and they are adapting to our reality. So they are talking, in fact, about our plants. So for all these reasons, I wish a great day of work, or days, and hope that we can continue to talk as something important for science translations that can come out of this. Okay, so I think we can do something more than this. Thank you so much, and I wish you a great day. Great days.
Thank you so much, Anna. And also for that very interesting intersection between what we're doing here and the history and science, of course. And now I will also ask a few words from Paulinas, who is the president of the Department of Applied Social Sciences at the Nobel School of Science and Technology. Thank you.
Thank you. And good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the invitation. It is very grateful for me to be here. I'm very pleased. I'm not so familiar with the thematic, but I believe that especially when we think about sociology, because I'm a sociologist, recently we speak often about visual sociology, and we can establish strong bridges between visual sociology and comics. So, as Hugo said, I'm here on behalf of the Department of Applied Social Sciences of Nova School of Science and Technology. The department, integrating only a brief note about the department, integrates different scientific areas, story of science and technology, industrial sociology, economic and management, and education. This meeting integrated in the project, I believe, investigation on comics and graphics novels from the Iberian culture area, will be for sure an excellent moment of discussion, broadly speaking, that address two methodological approaches to the study of the comics. I'm sorry. The first one, as an object of study, it means that we are going to analyze in terms of popular culture, for instance, or in other thematics, in the connection with science and technology, and on the other side, as a way of transmitting and dissemination science. I think that we have here two perspectives about the way that we can look the comics as an object of study. This COST meeting is precisely about the connection of comics to science and technology, and more recently, I believe, to the Anthropocene, which provides the opportunity to share, exchange, and develop relevant ideas to perceive these dimensions from comics. I would like to congratulate the organizers and the other researchers involved in this project, which will be very, very fruitful, I believe. As I mentioned before, I would like to underline this connection with my specific area. It means the visual sociology. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paula, also for the wonderful connection between the field of sociology and comics. And now I would like to ask Couch Shaya, who is joining us by Zoom, to give also a few words. Could you present? Sorry.
Yes, I'm just trying to make a better. Carlos.
Yes, I can introduce myself if you want.
Vou fazer em português. Tenho o gosto de apresentar o professor Carlos Cheia, que é o decano do nosso departamento, e a quem eu pedi que estivesse presente porque tem sido um dos grandes impulsionadores da tradução na nossa faculdade, no nosso departamento. Portanto, sem mais demora, passo a palavra e agradeço a sua presença. Obrigada.
Thank you, Margarida. Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted for hosting on behalf of my department, hosting this event. It is quite interesting comics translation school. It is aligned with our policy for interdisciplinary networking, both within our research units, like the one I coordinate, setups, and all the recent tradition of translation studies in our department. We've been trying to, this has been a great bid for us within the department. It has not been for many years because translation studies is quite recent in our department. It has been a fight for many years, but now it is established. The way we are working with so many different people within these within these conferences, with so many other people and working with other research units, this is the way of doing it. This is the way we reinforce within our walls, reinforce the importance of translation studies. And this is worth seeing that you are in the right path. And this wonderful program that you have prepared proves that we are right. Translation studies has a place in the future in our department and in our faculty. So I can only wish you all a very, very successful and fruitful meeting. And thank you for being here, and welcome to Lisbon for those of you who are in Lisbon. Welcome to this conference for those of you who are in Zoom like myself. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigada. E pronto, e eu agora vou-me apresentar para terminar esta cerimónia de abertura. As you probably already know, my name is Hugo Almeida. I am the coordinator of the iCOn-MICs Working Group 3, along with Eduard Weil, who unfortunately cannot be present due to overlapping schedules. I can see that Eduard is there in the Zoom call. So first of all, I would like to once again thank the presence of the representatives of the institutions involved in the organization of the Comics Translation School, the iCOn-MICs co-chair, Jesus Jimenez Parea, Carlos Cheia in representation of the Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities, and Eduardo Rodrigues, co-coordinator of the Inter-University Center for the History of Science and Technology, and Paulinas, president of the Department of Applied Social Sciences of the Nova School of Science and Technology. Of course, I would like to thank the Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities for hosting this event and for granting us access to their translation resources. So it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the Comics Translation School, an event which, as it has already been mentioned, is a result of our work within the iCOn-MICs COS network of international comics scholars working in the Iberian cultural area, which is to say that it focuses mostly on comics made in Portuguese and Spanish-speaking countries, or by Portuguese and Spanish-speaking authors. In particular, the Comics Translation School has been one of the main projects of our Working Group 3, which focuses not just on...
Oui, ça marche, hein? Mais moi aussi, je me suis connectée sur le lien.
Of course. Which focuses not just on translation, but also on comics as intercultural dialogue in a more general sense, which includes the exchange of comics cultures and the diaspora of comics authors. On my and Eduard's behalf, I would like to thank the wonderful task force that volunteered to make this school possible. So our in-house conspirator, Margarida Pina, Cristina Álvares, who is sitting there, Dominique Faria, who is sitting there, and Jakob Jankowski, who is sitting there, and also Santiago Martin, who could also unfortunately not be present. He is also on Zoom, actually. Now, since I am not a translation scholar myself, it was my co-organizer's merit, scientific expertise, and judgment that guided our program's development, with the goal of creating an enriching and diverse environment for discussing the specificities of comics translation. Now, I will let you judge the results of our work in the following days. I am personally very optimistic and very happy about the results that we've had this far. Joining scholars, comics artists, comics editors, and translators in order to have cross-field discussions on how to promote comics and comics scholarship, how to reach new audiences, and produce multidimensional views on comics and its practices is a cornerstone of the iComics project. Fortunately, for that end, we were also able to convince several authors and editors to come and discuss with us their experiences and practical expertise with translation during the process of creating and publishing comics. We hope that this particular approach to what it is, in essence, an event geared towards learning will be an invaluable resource for all present. So I would like to extend my thanks to all the generous and accomplished translators, scholars, artists, and editors who accepted our request to contribute to the study and practice of comics translation here at the Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities. And finally, I would like to thank our participants and trainees and the audience accompanying us here and online. So let's start the Comics Translation School.
Bom dia a todas e a todos. Vamos então dar início à nossa escola, à nossa formação em tradução de banda desenhada e novelas gráficas. Muito obrigada pela vossa presença, pela vossa adesão a esta formação, que, como já foi dito, é organizada no âmbito da ação COST iCON-MICs. É a primeira formação, a primeira escola, a primeira training school que o Working Group 3 organiza. Eu aproveito a ocasião para agradecer ao Hugo a fantástica coordenação desta task force e também ao Eduardo. E é meu grande prazer, minha honra, dar início então a esta primeira conferência e receber a Carol Pimentel, que vou apresentar. Portanto, agradecer-lhe a sua presença a Carol Pimentel é editora-chefe e sócia proprietária do Estúdio Patinhas. É professora do programa de pós-graduação no curso de produção editorial nas Faculdades Paulinas de Comunicação, mestre em tradução pela Universidade de São Paulo, através da Faculdade de Filosofia, Letras e Ciências Humanas, no programa de Estudos de Tradução, onde desenvolveu pesquisa sobre tradução de histórias em quadrinhos. Vencedora de 3 prémios HQ-MICs, sendo um deles pelo seu livro Tradução de Histórias em Quadrinhos, Teoria e Prática, publicado em 2018 pela Transitiva, que é este livro aqui. A Carol Pimentel é responsável pela tradução de mais de 400 títulos de quadrinhos e edição de mais de 380 revistas, além de adaptar diversos títulos e ser a roteirista de 3 obras publicadas na área. A conferência dela esta manhã tem como título Influências do cinema nos universos Marvel e DC e como tradutor deve-se adaptar a elas. Muito obrigada, Carol, passo-lhe a palavra, vamos ouvi-la com toda a atenção.
Obrigada.
Thank you so much. I'll be standing because I need to walk. So I'd like first to thank you all for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here today. Thank you, Hugo, for everything that you organized, everything at this event in the hall. Thank you, Jakub, for your communication. You've been so kind to me since the first email. Thank you. Thank you for this space. And I'm sorry if I make some mistakes in English, but I'll try to be very cohesive. And let's start. Otherwise, I'll be talking here so much. So I'll start with this. She's the responsible for me, for this love for comics. In Brazil, in the 80s, there was a TV series for Wonder Woman, and I fell in love with her. So, oh my God, she can do all that. And so this is when everything started. I started to read comics, and I started doing things, learning things, and collecting things. Nowadays, I have no space for clothes in my house, but I have thousands and thousands and thousands of comics. So, and I'll tell you a little bit of myself before I introduce the issue itself, because it's important for you to know. When I was developing my master research, I was looking for a specific theme. So in Brazil, we have this kind of publication that is called Coleção Histórica. So they gather old stories from the 60s, from the 70s, and I fell in love with this, especially for Iron Man. That is one of my favorites. I thought I could create this kind of thing, and he inspired me a lot. And so I decided to study this. So I was focusing on slangs and how people treat translation about slangs and how they make the localization of translation. And when I started my research, I started talking to many different translators. I had this, I decided to talk to some editors and translators, and people received me. And when I realized I was going more for habitus theory from Pierre Bourdieu, and because everything you know, everything you learn, everything you think it's not important will be important on your translation, especially for comics, because you need all your experiences, because people are talking about different things. They have different identities, they have different alter egos, they have different names, they have different social, they live in different spaces, so they talk about life, right? So it's very important for you to know. Sometimes the tea that your grandma makes will fit for a translation of Dr. Strange, because he uses a lot of different things, and it's very important. So telling a little bit about myself, I was graduated in physics. I am graduated in physics. It's very weird. So it was my fifth choice because I loved everything and I wanted to study everything. And when I was kind of getting old, my father said, you have to decide what you're going to do with your life. So pick one and do it till the end. And I went for physics because of him. So when you are in physics school, you realize that you're not a playboy, you cannot afford for the things he does, and you are not going to be able to build an armor such as this. When I realized that, I said, okay, so what am I going to do with my life? And I went for astrophysics. So I studied astrophysics. And I started working with astrophysics in astrophysics school in São Paulo. Nobody knows it exists. They know about the planetarium, but they don't know about the astrophysics school. So I started a campaign for bringing people. And how do you bring people to physics? It's such a horrible thing. Nobody wants to talk about and everything. So I went back to comics and I organized an event to talk about how physics works in comics universe, in movies universe, such as the transporter from Star Trek, we were starting to discuss this kind of thing. Nobody liked that. Nobody approved my idea. And it's a kind of a problem because astrophysics school is inside of a park, and this park is coordinated by the Secretaria do Verde. So nobody understands why do you have to talk about education, but it's an education, it's a school. But anyway, they didn't like it. I went to my room, I cried a lot, and I said, what am I going to do with my life? Because I'm not happy. And that's when I decided to go to my master's degree. I started talking to a professor at USP, and he received me. He said, I don't understand anything about comics, but if I understand about translation, so you have to go to ECA, that is a Escola de Comunicação e Artes in São Paulo, and you have to look for a professor there that helps you with me. And I talked to the responsible, and everything went well. And this is a part of my master's degree, so just the specific part, not the interviews because of the translators and everything that made me learn about this, everything. So this is my qualification exam. It was such a challenge because I didn't, people usually deliver a relatório and a report with everything that you did, and I did mine in comics form. So as I was studying comics, I decided to do that. And there's a note from a professor. He had said, it's very ousado for you to do that. So, but it was cool. And they decided to approve me. So the first thing I started learning about comics in South is that Iron Man is such a very important character in Marvel Universe because he's the first good guy that has a dirty face, as they call it. He has a mustache. All the good guys don't wear mustaches. I don't know where it comes from, but they decided to do this. And he's inspired in Howard Hughes, a very important man in the US, the aviation and everything else. So I started learning this kind of differences and what are important from different characters. They started calling this my attention. And the first thing, and during this master's, I went with interviews, and around 3 months after the first interview in Panini, they decided to call me to be an editor, junior editor, as I was studying translation. So they said, oh, would you like to come here? We have a space here, so we need one. And I was the first woman to enter Panini's comics division. So it was a very important thing for me in Brazil, especially in Brazil, where I don't know how it works here, but comics in Brazil, it's most related with men. Most of the guys are men working, men translating, men doing everything. No, I'm not against you guys, I'm sorry. But just saying, there are no space for us. And it was very important for me to be the first one. After this, so I started working with them, and the first material I read was Fantastic Four. And when I started, Reed Richards is a very important physicist. He was the most intelligent man at Marvel Universe. So when I saw a blackboard behind him, I started seeing those formulas and everything. I said, this is all wrong. It's not related with it. And I said, oh my God, you're not doing this. You're not a physicist anymore. You're a translator. You're an editor. So you have to look for the words. And then this was my first shock, like, calm down. You have to look for the words, not for the... So they use very different and beautiful equations to put behind those very smart guys. And this was my first shock, like, oh my God, it's not real. So I talked about this. And this is habitus, the habitus theory. Like, habitus is a signature concept of Bourdieu that refers to a set of dispositions and embodied behaviors derived from the unconscious internalization of the social structure. since had to explain why agents from different social groups show different patterns of social behavior and attitude, which leads to different social outcomes. So as I said at the beginning, everything you learn, everything you know, the way you talk, all the slangs you use, all your families, all your contacts, they will be necessary when you are translating comics, because you have such a different array of characters. And I brought you some of them and how the movies, the cinema influences, and how do you have to be in touch with everything that comes out, because movies, they reach more people than comics. Now, loads of people come, they saw the movie, they wanted to learn about Spider-Man. Oh my God, who's a Spider-Man? Oh my God, where do you live? And so they start reading, they start looking for different publications, and we have a huge amount of different publications. So starting with the guy, when in 2008, we had the first Iron Man movie, it was a boom. Like, comics are coming to the movies. They had such a big event for everything. The movie called a lot of people to come to the cinema, and many people start reading, and who's this guy? It was such a wonderful thing for Robert Downey Jr. because he was back on track again, and he was gathering himself, and he changed everything. Nobody knows there is a face of him called Demons in a Bottle, if you'd like to read. It's a very sad Iron Man story. He loses everything. He's an alcoholic. He has such a lot of problems with drinking. He lost starting industries. He starts living on the streets, and he has a kind of a relationship with a girl. They lost a baby in the snow, and nobody talks about it. Nobody tells you to read this. This kind of publication is getting really difficult for you to get because people want to talk only about good things, the good things about the characters, but not their lives and how their weaknesses. So they decide, I recommend this, thank you so much. I recommend this for you to read. And if you see, so this is from the 80s, around 80s or late 80s. And you can see still the mustache, he's still wearing the mustache, but he had such a curly hair, like very irregular. And after that, after the movie, all Superman, all Iron Mans you will find, they have Robert Downey Jr.'s face. They changed it. He changed it. He made history. And some slangs, some things he used to say in the movies came into the comics. So most of the time when you are translating things, you have to go to the movies or get the movie or something, and you have to learn about it. So we use the same things not to cause strangeness when people are reading. Because as I said, many people come from the movies to the comics, so you have to use and back and forth again and again. He was the first one changing everything. Let's keep with Marvel. So Logan, it was another big hit from the movies. And someone. Sorry. No problem. So when Logan went to the movies, everybody was talking about, and they started selling this kind of comic book, and I saw it on a shelf, and I opened. But the first shocking thing is when you remove this. It's not the same book. It's not about the movie. This is a very important phase from Wolverine called Old Man Logan, in English, Velho Logan, in Portuguese. And it's a different phase from everything. There are no longer X-Men. The United States was divided among the bad guys, among the villains. And it's Hawkeye is very old and blind, and he's driving the Jeep from a Spider-Man, and he's crossing the deserts. It's a very good story, but there's nothing with the movie. It's nothing with it. And they use it, only the name Old Man Logan, Velho Logan, just to sell it. So it's another thing you will face when you are working with comics. People need to sell these books. Sometimes, as I said, the Iron Man comic, like Demon in a Bottle, it's terrible, but it's wonderful, I'm sorry, but you never find it. So it's the same thing as Old Man Logan. You never find this. Everything that you find is like this, the new kinds of publication. And this Velho Logan, it's nothing to do with this one that I showed you. And why not? Because you have to understand, Marvel and DC, they started doing some great events throughout stories. Because sometimes they have to reboot a character, sometimes they have to start again a story, sometimes they have the reboot. So start from zero again, the number zero, the number one. Everybody wants the number one. After that, nobody buys anything. So there was a great event in 2014. I don't know when exactly it happened here in Europe, but in the US, it was 2014, and called Secret Wars. It was not the Secret Wars from 1984. It was a different Secret Wars. This time, Beyonder, there's an alien came, divided all the worlds. He split all the heroes in different places, and they started a war. Again, the principle was almost the same, but in 84, they developed this first big saga to sell toys. Marvel made a partnership with a great factory, from a toy factory, and they decided to sell it. So they did these great wars. And in Brazil, it was such a problem because nobody heard at that time about Captain Marvel. So they hired a guy authorized by Marvel to redraw over Captain Marvel, and they did Iron Man. They put Iron Man over it. So see how things work. Sometimes you're dealing with a translation and you don't know about the saga, you don't know about this division, and you don't know about the specificities of this work, this kind of work, and you have to learn, you have to read. So my first advice to all of you, if you're going to start translating comics and you don't know the character, try to look for some old comics. Try to get old comics, try to read old comics to get their slangs, to get their personality, to learn about themselves. So you won't do any mistakes when you deliver your work, because readers are cruel. I'm telling you about Brazil, so no one cares who's the translator, since you don't have any problem. If you have a problem in translation, you will be the first one to be found and exploded in the internet. Turn off all the comments, turn off everything you have, because people will kill you on comments. Everything. I'll tell you a tragical history I brought you as a scenario, and for us to talk about that. So continuing about Logan, I don't know how many of you know about X-23. She's 23, huh? She appears as a little girl in Logan's movie, but actually she's not his daughter in that sense. She's a clone. She was cloned from him a long time ago, and she's an adult. And she was really created only because DC and Marvel at the beginning, they were fighting for names. There was a huge fight for Shazam. He was called Captain Marvel at the beginning, but Marvel was Marvel, and they decided to have a Captain Marvel as well. So they had a huge fight in Justice. Marvel kept the name Marvel, so Captain Marvel became a property of Marvel, and Shazam was called for DC. So as he was using the magical word Shazam, so they decided to call him Shazam. So it's another thing, if you don't know about that, Shazam is really a problem to translate. You have to find and localize him in time to use the correct words. And sometimes it's allowed for you to call, depending on the phase. If it's such an old comic as this, you can use Marvel, Captain Marvel. But new ones you can no longer use. So there's another problem. And she's been traced, and many characters such as Spider-Woman and everyone, they were just saving the names. They were registering the names not to cause this justice war again. So then they decided to split everything. No one can use the same name, but they create sometimes similar characters, and you have to learn everything about. So do you know why she has only 2 huge claws in hands and 1 on the foot? She has only 1 in the feet. It's different from Logan. So because she's a female, and they said that the white wolf, the Wolverine, it's called, the females has such a large claw on their feet, but males don't. Males doesn't. So they used the animal qualifications in a character to develop her again. Oh, this is wonderful. Do you guys saw how many of you saw the Spider-Man movies? Yes. Great. This is a really serious problem. I don't know how many of you know that this guy, this white guy, is not really Peter Parker. They used characters from Miles Morales. Oh, I'm sorry. This guy. He is the really one responsible for the representation that Tom Holland took to the movies. He's such a nice guy. He's from, he has descendant from Puerto Rico and United States. His mother, Hughes Morales, she's from Puerto Rico, and he's Black. He's different. So all the nice characteristics that Tom Holland brought to the movie, they are from him, but not from Spider-Man, Peter Parker, as we know. So why did it happen? No one wants to change their characters. I faced such a lot of problems when Captain America changed to the Hydra side. People used to write me this 2 years ago and say, "What are you doing with my Captain America?" And I said, I'm not the writer. I'm not the responsible for it. I'm just a translator. So they decided to do this with him. And people lose these senses of how this industry works. And they get really angry when you mess with their characters. So why are you doing this to my favorite character? So can you picture Spider-Man call for the movies, and you have Miles Morales instead of the white Peter Parker? It will be a shock. People don't know, and it makes me really angry. This kind of whitewashing is such a serious problem in this industry, and it will still be. I don't know for how long, and I hope fans and readers really change that. And I like to talk about this character in special. For you to read, start reading Miles Morales, start learning about the differences. We have in this last movie, No Way Home, as it came from alongside, I have just a little spoiler, but we have this multiple verses, different verses. And he is the Spider-Man from Universe 1610, 1610. So we have the Universe 1610, and it's different from the 616, that is the regular one that we know all the characters, that the white Peter Parker has the white Mary Jane and the white Gwen Stacy and so on. So people don't know sometimes about this. And the comics, they come and specify if it's Ultimate Universe, the 1610, we call Ultimate Universe, or 616, 616, as we call the regular universe. And this movie brings it, but it brings 3 white Peter Parkers. Again, they decided not to bring, I don't know why. And anyway, this is Ganke Lee. So he was the inspiration, the real inspiration for Ned, this guy. So he has the face almost close to the comics, as you saw, and he has all the characteristics. He's wonderful. He really likes Peter Parker. He's really a friend. And there's such a funny story in comics. These 3, they share a room. They live together at the university. So these 2, they were best friends, Ganke and Miles. And Fabio Medina, he's an X-Men. He has such a horrible name, X-Men name, Golden Balls, and because he releases Golden Balls all the time, and he started studying at the same university. And it's such a beautiful passage because when Ganke sees him, he falls in love automatically. Who's he? Help me. And he said, come on. But Fabio was transferred to this university because he decided to assume that he was powerful, that he was an X-Men, that he has powers, and then he needed to talk about. So they transferred him, and Ganke says to Miles, hey, go there and talk to him. You're a superhero as him. But nobody knows I'm a superhero. It's quiet, still quiet. Nobody knows. And I said, but please go there and talk to him. I'm chubby and I'm different. I'm not sure if he's going to like me. And he said, do you think it's easier for me to talk to him? I'm Black and I'm descended from foreign people. So it's really a problem. I still have the same problems as you do. So it's a very beautiful moment. They kept apart, they didn't show it on the movies. And it's very beautiful. It's human. So that's why I said at the beginning that everything you need is inside of you, all the experiences. You just have to learn about all these confusions that I'm bringing to you. So I'm bringing more practical information. About the girls, this is, I said, so it was Secret Wars. They released in 2014. And I was invited to translate this comic. And one of these worlds at the war was called the A-Force. And it was inhabited only by women. Only by women. So they called me to translate this one and another girl to make the adaptation. So to check the information and to see if everything was okay. And I started talking to her. We need to give these women different voices because they're different. I don't talk as Cristina does, and don't talk as you does. So we need to put this inside of a comic. How do we do that? So She-Hulk is a lawyer, and I decided to use more formal words for her. So she was talking in a formal way. In Portuguese, we have para and pra. So people say, pra ir. So, and I didn't use this kind of things. I use it para, so more formal words for her. Nico Minoru, I don't know how many of you know her. She's a witch, and she uses, her spells can never be repeated. So she needs to learn different words from different languages, because if she uses a spell like open, she can never use this open again. So she needs other language, and other language, and other language, and everything, and so on. So all this stuff, you have sometimes to translate things in Russian. It appears like beaux-moi and stuff, or French words, and you have to use them. It's more than knowing just one language. You have to research. I don't know how many of you knew about her, and so she appeared in this, and she's a very common character in Marvel Universe, such as Miss America Chavez. She has the powers of Captain America, but she's from Latin America. She has this curly long hair, and she talks all different words, and she's very funny. She's a funny girl, and so you have to adapt. So I used one kind of language for Nico Minoru. I asked some friends who had teenage daughters, and I said, what are the slangs nowadays? Because I'm getting old, I don't know anymore. And in my time, it was used like this. Nowadays, it means a different thing. So use your friends, use your family, ask people sometimes. When I'm translating Miles Morales, sometimes I wonder if I am able to use this word or not, if I'm going to be rude to black people or not. So I asked my friends, and I said, do you think this is too much? Do you think is it okay for him? Is it okay for him to be, he's a teenager, so is it okay for the language? Am I offending you? So I'm really sorry because I asked my friends. And so you need to be careful. People are going to read this. As I said, if translators make mistakes, you will be crucified. So if you don't use everything you can. Let me go. So talking about Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. This was very, it was a movie, I don't know here, I'm talking mostly about Brazil experience, and it was a huge success. Lots of people went to the movies. It was an exploded in sales and everything, and they decided to release this publication. So why bring Black Panther to the comics again? How do we do this? How do we bring him not being so silly as we were in the beginning? So this kind of publication, we have the main history here, and we have the origin history in the end. So you can learn about the character. You can see the first time he went to comics. So it was in '63 in the US, and we bring this kind of thing so people can learn about. So how not be such silly as they were here, or how not to be so, I don't know. So they decided to call Ta-Nehisi Coates. He's a very important man. He's a very important journalist in Africa. He talks about politics. He learns, he knows a lot about the problems they are having in there. And he was invited to write 20 of these 20 magazines that we gather here in this kind of publication. And why do we do this? Because people no longer in Brazil go to newsstands. They don't buy this kind of things anymore. I have an expression like, we are the adults that can buy and can afford our own toys. So we pay like more expensive publications. And this gathers, as I said, 5 of this. So you have an arc. An arc is a gathering of 5 stories that comes to close. It has a small close depending on a saga that they are inserted. So sagas are longer, arcs are from 5 to 5. So he was invited to write 2 arcs for him, and he did it. It's very good. I recommended this. So, and as I said, this is we call lombada branca, the spine, white spine. And because it's very famous, this kind of publication in Brazil, you can buy, if you buy 2 or 3 of these, you have a complete story of a character. So people prefer these kind of things. And the translator, so when you are invited to translate a small one, you have the same time to translate the big one. Translators are always suffocated with schedules. We always have to do things from yesterday. People sometimes don't want to pay the price that it is. They cry and they're working and everything. So sometimes we have to cry back and ask for more time to do things. So I don't know how things work here. I went to a bookshop yesterday and I saw some of them, like many French publications, different ones. So the big ones, as we call in Brazil, European format. So they're bigger, it's very beautiful. So sometimes, and I saw some of these, you have more than one publication inside. So probably you won't have a lot of time to do that. Cry, bargain for time when you receive this kind of work. Going to, these are the last ones from Marvel, just a reunion. We have a short period where Spider-Woman, she decided to have a baby. I'm not giving you the spoilers how and who's the father. And she decided, she realizes that this is a small scene where she's saying goodbye to her motorcycle. And what's the link between being pregnant and motorcycles? And I started research and I realized, I learned that when the vibration of the motorcycle can make you lose the baby. I didn't know about that. So as I said again, you have to research. And sometimes women who were pregnant, probably you knew about that. You knew about the cares that you must have with yourself. So it's just 3 balloons, but it takes research again. Moon Girl, she's 9-year-old girl. She's a 9-year-old girl, and she is the most intelligent girl in Marvel Universe nowadays. Reed Richards lost his place for her. So in Brazil, we never could get one single publication of her. I cried a lot. I asked a lot. I begged them, please bring this kind of beauty. No, there are no problem. And all the times when it comes to women on covers in Brazil, you will never find unless it's a special thing or a design thing. Because as I said at the beginning, the public is mainly male. So they don't buy if they see a girl on the cover. Until when are we going to have this kind of prejudice? Sometimes I ask myself, why don't you like us? So give us a chance. Miss Marvel, nowadays, she's a Muslim girl. It's wonderful. She has wonderful stories. She talks about being covered, the problems she faces in her house, the problems she has outside because she lives in the US. So she goes to school in the US. She doesn't want to wear all those clothes. She doesn't want to be covered. She doesn't understand sometimes why she cannot go to the streets, why she cannot go out until late at night and things. And she's hit by the mists of, and she got powers. So it's no longer the blonde one. She's a Muslim girl. And she uses Urdu. She talks sometimes with words in different language, and you have to research. You have to know about the costumes, the behavior, how they behave inside, why they do not eat such kind of things, and why. Because everything is inside of her stories. So if you're invited to translate this Miss Marvel, you have to learn about another culture. You have to see the examples. And just to finish with Marvel, nowadays we have a different Hulk. This is Shaw, Amadeus Shaw is his name, and he's the Hulk. And what happened to Bruce Banner? I'm not telling you. But something happened with Bruce Banner, and sometimes readers comes to the newsstand and everything and said, why is this guy? He's a Korean guy living in the US again with his sister, and he's the new Super Hulk. So everything changes throughout time. Everything changes throughout sagas. Everything changes and you must follow everything. So sometimes not to be scared or astonished when you say, oh my God, it's not Bruce Banner. Am I translating it wrong? No, it's right. It's Amadeus Shaw. nowadays. So check all the information. If you're invited, buy some old comics. Once you find, you don't have to do such a long research and everything, just to see how people are using their way to talk, how they talk, what expressions they use. If you decided for a term, you can never change it. I started making some lists. I have some long Excel lists about the terms that different characters use, some trejeitos, things they use to talk, and mainly things that are in fixed, so start industries. You can never change that. If you say indústrias start, you have to say indústrias start forever, because readers will feel it. Sometimes you are new in this profession or anything, but the readers are not. They read this since little kids, and they say, that's why they call me, why are you changing my Captain Marvel? And I say, not doing it. So you have to be really careful. Let's move to DC. DC is no longer called DC Comics because it was DC Comics, right? The C is for comics. So they took it out. I don't know how many of you knew about it. So it's another thing. You can never deliver a translation from DC with DC Comics. You just have to cut. So even the old publications like this for DC, they're no longer DC Comics, they're just DC. So this is the first thing. And I like to start with her because she is a different character. She started first in Batman the Animated Adventures. It was a cartoon on TV. So she was debuted at there, and then she came to the comics. She wasn't a character from a comic book, then went to TV. It was on the other hand. So she became very famous after the movies, the Suicide Squad, and with Margot Robbins. And the first thing I got shocked, she's really thin. But for the movies, they made her cintura thinner digitally. They correct that to make her even thinner. Why? My God, people are starving. Sometimes the women suffer from different disorder, eating habits. It's already a problem. Sometimes we face lots of prejudice. You girls, you women know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you don't feel okay with your hair. You don't feel okay, like you're having a bad hair day, or you're having problems with clothes. And people are making nowadays, 21st century, her even skinner. Where are the normal people? When are we going to the movies, right? And the second thing that disturbs me a lot about her is that she was a psychologist. She was a professional. She used to work at Arkham Asylum. And she was treating some patients, and she was interested to treat a certain smiling character, like the Joker, and she started treating him, and he turned her into a sociopath. So again, why does not a man treats him and becomes a sociopath? No, never happened. But a girl, it happens. And I'm really sorry about what is happening on the movies nowadays. And I think Black people must have their spaces and everything. So, but why keep bringing this kind of thing? Why don't they bring different and new things like they're having in comics? Because people want to see their favorite characters. And this is the only explanation I have. Black Canary, this was a very nice story of her that again I was invited to translate, and I'm telling you about the specificities of this one. This job gave me a lot of research, lots of trouble to translate. All the chapters, the chapters divided inside of this book was named after David Bowie moves, David Bowie songs. So this was the first problem. How many people know about this? How many people will do this relation like this? And I said, I have to translate. And how do I do this? Because I cannot use official translations for music in Brazil. And I said, can I use, and translators, you don't have a lot of spaces to put notes, to add notes, because it's a comic. There are no spaces. The pages are all used or drawn. And this was the first thing I said, I want to leave this in English and put a note for people to know. They said, no, you have to translate. I said, oh, we're going to lose this. So this was the first thing lost in this translation. And the second one, the book, the comic opens with a newspaper cut, and it's written by Tantu Labich. It was the name of the person. And I said, is he a she or a he? How do we use the word now? How do I use the articles? Oh my God. I read the first, the second, the third, no clue, the fourth, no clue, the 20th, no clue of what was the gender of Tantu Labich. I said, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I translated first. And after I start cutting all the articles and rewriting the phrases to adapt and to leave the gender out. And in Portuguese, you know how difficult it is. All the words have gender. So how do you do that? And it was like, and the time was the same as I had to do for the other comics. So it was like, I said, just a little bit, I did just one more day because I'm finishing this. So I give you the comics and I need more time to this one. So, and I rewrote. It was such a huge work, but it was awesome. The result in the end, it's very cool. But sometimes you have to find this things, this way to finish your job. You have to invent, create sometimes. And as I said, use your own tools, use everything in you, or you know, right? DC again, talking about the characters. I don't know if you displayed the Shocker adventures on TV here in Europe, but in Brazil we had, and it was such a great success. People loved him, but there are no comics of the Shocker. Why? I keep asking myself why people do this, and they say there are no public. There are no public, or you don't want to buy it. Because licenses are very expensive, and they're paid through pages. Each page has a price, because you have to pay the writer, the illustrator, the colorist, the inker. So, and you have to pay the license for Marvel or DC. So it's very expensive. Each page is very expensive to be licensed. And these Green Lanterns, why don't they use, again, it's Jon Stewart. I'm sorry. They never brought a story from Jon Stewart. And yesterday I was looking at this comic book, this bookstore, and I saw the same things as I see in Brazil. You have Batman, Spider-Man, Captain America, and Wolverine, X-Men, and that's it. You don't have loads of publication. So I don't know how things work here, but I hope people change this kind of things, like the Black Manta. He's a Black character, and he's the villain. So many villains used to be Black people. So isn't it a problem as well? Don't we have to change these? The comics need changing until today. And even for women. This is, I don't know how many of you saw this movie, this Professor Marston and Wonder Woman. It has a part of the history. Professor Marston is the man responsible for the lying detector. I don't know if you call it polígrafo, we call it in Portuguese. So, and this lace of truth was inspired in it. So this is how she uses the lace to make people tell the truth. So you can never lie to her. This is the polygraph. This is his invention. And he used to have an open relationship. All the three of them were in agreement with that. And he used to have two wives, Elizabeth Marsden, and the blonde girl, she was a student she was studying psychology with him, and they decided to have a relationship. So Wonder Woman was inspired in his Wonder Woman. So many comics were burned in bonfires in history when people discovered them. They had to recolor her clothes. She used to have a mini skirt and rounded, so they redraw and they draw shorts on her to start changing the character throughout history. So, and this representation, it was like, oh my God, she's wearing such a short thing on TV. And this one brings another uniform, more advanced than Gal Gadot. She changed it a little. And when the movie came out, she was trying to do such a serious job. And we have a female director as well. So she was careful about the scenes. So there are no scenes from the bottom to the top. So they're filming her face, not her thighs. And as movies used to do as well. So there was a writer, Jorge Pérez. He was the transformer of her. He was the one that changes everything. So before Jorge Pérez, we had these burned comics that these were burned. And he decided to give her a mythology experience. She said she's one of the daughters of the Greek gods, and they created the Amazons. And it's such a beautiful, so I'm sorry, I'll be there. This is part of the Temiscira, or Ilha do Paraíso, as we call, Paradise Island. And he draws and he writes at the same time. So he's more complete, and he gives such her wonderful landscapes, wonderful backgrounds to Wonder Woman stories. So he was the first one changing her, giving the long and curly hair, black, dark hair, and he did it in such a wonderful way. So this is just one part of it. I'm going to read this in Portuguese because it's more. É, na verdade, a fonte de onde se origina toda a vida, o útero de Gaia, mãe de todos nós. Essas luzes são almas de todas as mulheres, cujas vidas foram encurtadas pelo medo e ignorância do homem. So, this is the new origin of Wonder Woman. This is how you do. This is a man giving her such an importance and respecting her in all characteristics. He's more worried when her mother is raped by Hercules, and that's when the war starts. That's when they break everything, and that's when they die, and they go to this Poço das Almas. And after that, Gaia decides to put them back. And she says that all the tears that falls from the skies fell into the water, and they created the Amazons. It's such a beautiful scene. They coming out of the water, and they live apart from the man's work for 300 years before Steve Trevor falls with his plane into the army, and everything starts. So Jorge Pérez was detected. He found this year that he has terminal cancer, and he refuses to receive treatment. He decided to be with his family. He said, I'm going to be with my family until the end. So, and this is such a big loss for the whole industry. He was a wonderful man as person, and he was so careful with all his stories. He wrote many, many, many different stories for many different characters, and he was so careful all the time. So the industry is suffering. If you follow him on Twitter, you will see there are lots of posts and he's telling about his life and everything. And Gail Simone, she's a writer for DC, and she is really a close friend. She's giving news about him through Twitter. And it's sad, it's such a big loss, but he changed the comics industry. And this is an example I brought to you from a mistake. This is the English version. So we have here terra 610, so it's not the, this is wrong. We have 616 or 1610, but they missed the number 1 here. It was a typo. So Dunslot, the writer, he said, he wrote I'm sorry note on his Twitter. Just said, oh my God, this was not a mistake for me. I wrote it all right, as I told you, that people kills you if you do something wrong. So yes, we know the ultimate universe is Earth 1610. It was that way in early drafts. A one stealing gremlins to blame. So comics made by humans. Sometimes people do that, but you have to go there, to be there, and to say that you're sorry. And I received that this girl, Vanessa, was working at Panini at that time, and she said, oh my God, there's a rumor on the internet, people are saying this is wrong, blah, blah, blah. I said, calm down, ours is right, I saw that. It's okay. I saw that and I correct that. And I was, oh my God, I have to do that. And there's a case, I don't have it here. This is my last thing, I promise. And it was the election time in Brazil, and that guy, that guy was using a word to describe himself as a myth. So, and in Portuguese, mito. And we had Daredevil's comics being released at the time, and it was Wilson Fisk, the King Crime, right? He was using the word, he was trying to be elected to be a governor, or I don't know, the mayor in New York. And there were some people making manifestations and parades to avoid. So some people were not okay with him being elected. And the translator decided to use myth, the word, translate to mito. Wilson Fisk is a mito. And I didn't see at that time, I was working as an editor-in-chief for Marvel at Brazil. So you deliver the functions, you have no time, you have special editors to take care of different lines. I used to take care of Spider-Man and X-Men because you have to know everything about it. And there was another guy for the Avengers, and there was another guy for some other publications, which included Daredevil. And he said it was okay. And I didn't know why, but my phone was ringing at that day, and my email box was exploding. I don't know why or how. I don't know how people from a newspaper, a local newspaper, Folha de São Paulo, they got my number and they started calling me, what is this? I want an interview with you. How can you use this word? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I turned off and said I was returning the call. And we had such a huge problem. Panini was sued by some people after that, only because of a word choice. So he decided to call Wilson Fisk the myth, as the guy was calling himself, and it caused such a big problem. And it came in the first page of Ilustrada. It's one of the cadernos, from a newspaper. They're parts of a newspaper, and one of these parts that talks about movies and everything. So it was the first page, printed with my name under it. And then, oh my God, I'll be spanked down the streets, and I was walking like this. So people this is why I'm telling you, it's very a problem. Choose your words carefully. Learn everything you can about the character. research, ask friends, ask different people, ask women. Remember, guys, to ask women if they talk like this. And try to be as more responsible as you can, because it's a wonderful, but it's such a complicated area as well. So this was what I wanted to talk about. I'm sorry if it took longer than I should. I'm sorry. And if you need anything, I'll be available by the next days. Or you can reach me throughout these contacts. Hope you enjoy. Thank you so much, guys. Do you have any questions? I'm sorry, I don't know if I have time for that, but so do you have questions? Any of it? I promise I won't buy.
Qual é que foi a tradução que gostaste mais de fazer?
It was a Franklin Richards. He is the son of Reed Richards and Sue Storm. Because it was meant for kids, but it involved a lot of physics. So I like that because, and I became a consultant for real physics and comics physics. So people come and ask me, does it happen? And sometimes I say, no, this one is okay, let me fix it. There is one Flash comics from DC that he works only with light, the light speed and the differences that the light provokes. So, and when I translated this one, Warner Bros. Brazil invited me to make some short specials of physics. It's on YouTube. I can send you the links after that, talking about the real powers of Superman, Flash, Black Canary, and a few others, and if it was true or not. So I was explaining physics in a thing called Domingo Heroico. So it's really cool to talk about how many hamburgers Flash has to eat to run like this and this kind of thing. I used to do these stupid counts to do this kind of thing. So it's cool sometimes. But this from Franklin Richard, I think it's my favorite. Thank you.
Obrigada, Carol.
Obrigada, gente.
Let's see if there is any questions from the audience.
I have one question. In Brazil, you have only one publishing house that is treating the superhero business and publishing, because in Poland, we all different publishing houses. And there is also a lot of research when it comes to proper names, for example, because you have different translations to different publishing houses. But in Brazil, it's only one, right?
It's we have a big one that Panini takes care of the comics industry mainly. So it's very difficult if you want to publicate anything. If you are an independent editor house, it's very difficult because Panini has the rights for everything. So I started creating these lists, as I said, because we have to translate everything. So, a stupid example, it's called a Shumagora. Shumagora is a villain, it's an alien villain from Marvel Universe. In English, it's written, it's spelled like S-H-U-M-A, Shuma. So in Portuguese, we use S-H-U-M-M-A, Shuma, with double M. I don't know why I decided, but it was printed long ago, and we kept this until today. So Panini, we have this agreement, internal agreement, to translate everything in accordance with these lists, we said, and we take care with everything because we cannot make mistakes in these different things. But it's only one. We have just two editors, the head editor-in-chief for Marvel and for DC. So if you have any questions or any problems, you go talk to them and then you keep doing so. Okay, thank you.
Calling Zoom, is there someone who wants to make a question on Zoom? I don't know. Em Zoom não há ninguém que queira colocar uma questão?
People can just also type down if they have questions.
Yes, but nobody's is typing down.
Yeah, let's just leave that option.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, I actually have like a full page of questions because I thought your talk was very interesting in the sense that you really mentioned multiple. You really approach translation through multiple different aspects. And what my colleagues from the working group 3, I think are now kind of used to me talking about a supposed expanded field of translation. And I'm using this term in the broadest way possible and acknowledging that, I'm not an expert in translation anyway, but I find the possibility of broadening the discussion of translation to other aspects to be an important one. And you do mention a lot of those aspects that don't have to do specifically with translating text. For example, the example that you gave that has to do specifically with the difficulties in translating works that come from shared universes and the difficulties in translating all of the works from one language to the other, right? Not all markets are able to support that sort of, wholesale translation of all the works. And the example that you gave from the original Secret Wars, in which they switched Captain Marvel for Iron Man, was very, very interesting. And I do feel that that's also a kind of translation, not necessarily, it's not a language translation. It's a deeper kind of translation that has to do with the specificities of how something is published in a given country. And I thought that was very interesting. I'm sorry, I'm just giving you like a sort of like a broad view of all the things that I have written here. I guess it does feel like translating specifically superhero comic books. And I believe that given what the talk that you gave, this is probably going to be different for translating different kinds of comic books, right? Is an immersive experience, right? You do have to be very in tune with the particular culture and this overwhelming history of these shared universes, right? Let me see if I can pinpoint a specific question. I'm sorry. For example, for example, it was interesting to me that it didn't seem there was any possibility of communication between the original publishers and the translators in different countries, in the sense of solving specific issues such as the gender of a character and so on. Is there never the possibility? Does Marvel, for example, Marvel and DC never offer the opportunity to solve specific translation issues?
This is awesome. Thanks for this question, because it's something that we try to do, but I don't know how the companies work, and they sometimes don't talk, like the heads of the companies. And what we do sometimes, I had one translator, Mario, he wrote to a writer on his Twitter. I don't know, he contacted him through social networks, and because there was a question that will be solved in a publication that wasn't even published in the US. So he was like the Tantula Beach thing that I said. So it was something like that, but it was running at the same time. It was being published in the US and in Brazil at the same time. It was a very important saga. And he wrote to the guy and said, I'm praying for him to see that and for him to answer me, because I really need to know, because we'll be facing a problem in 10 editions ahead. So sometimes we try to do this contact, but from ourselves. I know Marvel has, because all Marvel comics are related. If you see one flower in Doctor Strange, this flower will be important in the X-Men 20 and so on. So I know they have huge meetings. When they are creating a new saga, they have these huge meetings. So I'm going to write X-Men, she's going to write Spider-Man, so we have to talk and create something together, and then we're going to talk to the one who's going to write Doctor Strange and so on. But sometimes they have a main thing, and we have to create stories. The writers have to create stories based on this main thing, and they know what they want to reach. So they create arguments and things to reach the object. But this is Marvel. I don't know how does it work on DC. I don't know if they do, because I know they have very separated comics. So I know people who are specialized in Superman, they write only Superman and Batman as well. And they invited different things. But sometimes they invited different writers, such as Gartienis, and to do different things and crazy things with the characters that people really don't like that much, but they invite. So it's very nice to see some different writers doing things, different things with Batman especially. But in Brazil, we try to reach from ourselves, just ourselves. Sorry.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Eu queria agradecer à Carol Pimentel esta fascinante conferência, que de facto se insere muito bem no espírito do Working Group 3. De facto, nós lidamos com a tradução, mas não apenas a tradução estritamente linguística, não é? Mas a tradução no sentido de translatio, como se dizia na Idade Média, não é? Portanto, no sentido de transposição, transição, passagem, circulação de várias coisas. Eu achei muito interessante porque, de facto, o seu perfil já é um perfil de translatio, não é? Há essa circulação entre a astrofísica, a tradução, os cómics, etc. Mas, sobretudo, a tradução intermedial, não é? A tradução entre vários dos cómics para o cinema, para os toys, não é? Para os brinquedos. E, de facto, o cinema é o medium dos mídia, não é? Tudo é traduzido, tudo chega ao mundo inteiro, a todos os públicos pelo cinema. E portanto, nessas passagens, nessas circulações, nessas transições, de facto, mostrou como esses percursos são, muitas vezes, de natureza eminentemente política, não é? Que tem a ver com discriminações, com segregações, com marginalidades, etc. Eu fiquei um bocado assustada com a história do público, não é? Porque realmente a profissão é um bocado... Traduzir cómics é uma profissão perigosa. Os fãs, não é? Isso acontece também em alguns setores da banda desenhada franco-belga, mas dá-me a ideia que nos cómics é mais... Quer dizer, é verdadeiramente... Pareceu, pelo que tinha dito, que era de facto uma força conservadora, não é? Sim. Para não dizer outra coisa. E voilà. Portanto, era isto. Muito obrigada. Não sei se há mais alguma pergunta. Andreia?
I have a very, very quick question, which is, as you rightly said, there are political issues with or problems with the politics in some of the works, with race politics, with gender politics.
Yeah.
And some of those issues are linguistic.
Yeah.
So ways of addressing those issues.
Está aqui uma coisa muito relevante que eu...
And I'd like to know what your approach is as a translator to those when you encounter those issues. And I was thinking about one of the examples he showed, which was something about Wonder Woman, and this is a response to the problems created by men, like woman, which is a very problematic word.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel free to change that to humankind, for example, if you are so inclined? Or do you feel, as a translator, do you feel that you can correct the politics, the linguistic politics?
Yeah, that's a good one. Sometimes we the only thing we opt most of the time is to be really strict to the original. The most strict and the most impartial from your own opinions, always, always. We always try to be distant from it, because if you start putting your own words, you start having problems in the future, because people really want to read. In Brazil, we have such a history in comics that in the 80s, there was Abril, Editora Abril was a huge company working with comics, and they had a different concept in translation. The balloon could not be moved. So you have to make it fit, no matter what. So they rewrite the stories. At that time, they used to rewrite. No, this is too big, you don't need that. And so they did different things like that. And nowadays, most of that, except from this kind of publication, you can never change the size of the balloon. But the new ones, it's vectorized, so you can use as many words as you need. It's not a problem. So nowadays, we try to be concise, distant, and maintain the original. So at that time, the myth example that I said, it was a word that could be used, but it was not the best choice at that moment. So this is what I say, that you need to be inside of the word, inside of everything, see what's going to be a problem. So I don't like the guy, but I don't use that word. If it was my translation, I would never use this, because I know at that moment it was related with him. So the man, she lives in Wonder Woman's case, she lives in a man's world. It's and it's installed, I think it's, how can I say? Marcado, já está muitos anos, for many years in history, they call Mundo dos Homens. E é Mundo dos Homens with capital letter in the M and in the H, please. And so we keep this as tradition. That's the word, I'm sorry. It's a tradition. Some things that became traditional, we can never change because of these problems with the readers, as I said. And on the other hand, we have Disney Plus nowadays with all the Marvel movies, and we are facing a crazy problem. It's so simple. It could be solved with a conversation. But people from the cinema, they never ask the people from the comics what are the words we use. And Disney doesn't even care if it is okay or not. So Black Widow, in comics, we write with Viúva Negra with a hyphen. And in this, Disney Plus, it's Viúva Negra without the hyphen. So if I'm translating materials that are based on Disney Plus, as I do nowadays, because I came out from Panini, I still work for them, but as outsourced. But because I wanted to do more than that, I was translating only for Panini, and nowadays I work with 9 different publishing houses. So thank God I have a lot of things to do. But Disney Plus is driving me crazy because of everything that is internalized here. I know there's a hype, and I know it's called like this. I cannot use for these publications. I don't know how things are going to be in the future. I hope someday they have a meeting or they allowed us to talk to them, because I wanted to call Disney and say, for God's sake, put the hyphen. It's driving me crazy, but they don't do. So everything that became a traditional, we don't change, even if we want to. So when I translate Wonder Woman, I want to rip it out, but I cannot do that. So I keep the Mundo dos Homens there. So that's it. I don't know if I answered it. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
So that kind of lines up with the thing I want to ask, because we are talking about Marvel, DC. Mm-hmm. We are talking about more classical comics. So have you worked with like independent comics, and how is it the approach? Because you don't have movies sometimes. You have the artist, the author, and So what's the approach here? Because it's different.
Yeah, this is a very great question as well, because it's easy for us. It's easier because the only thing you have to do with independent comics, like Image comics, we have a lot of publications from Image. When it's the number one, you talk. So Deve is a publishing house in Brazil that I know they have here as well, and Deve is the owner of some Image rights from some comics. So when they invite me to translate the number one, I create an Excel plan with all the terms I used. And if there is a number two, I will fulfill this Excel. And then I give the translation with the Excel, with all the terms I used. I deliver this to them, and they keep this in a file. So if it happens with Low, there's a publication from Rick Remender, and Greg Tocchini is the artist. It's very beautiful. I really recommended this. Low, it's talking about the end of the world, and people are living under the water in some substations. The art is amazing. So I created all the terms in Portuguese for Low. Low 1, 2, and 3. So I used the other ones. So this is how I don't know if everybody works like this. I don't know if all the translators do such a thing, but as I am really worried, and as I was the first woman to be an editor-in-chief, and I was really massacred by the fans at the time, they wrote me such a horrible things in the inbox, and I blocked all my social. And I forgot about it. And then I created again, and I breathed in and said, okay, I have to deal with it. So I'm worried. So I work like this. Every time I'm creating a number one, I'm creating specific terms, I create this table to be references in the future. So if nobody had done this before, and I'm going to translate the number two, I try to buy the number one, check if there is information. No, there isn't. Okay, so I'm creating, and then I give it with the translation. Okay? Thank you.
Tá na hora de fechar, não é?
Acho que eu trouxe umas coisinhas. I brought you some of this, so if I'll leave here if you want to grab one. Feel free, please. And thank you so much. I'll stop now.